Al Pacino may be celebrated as one of the greatest actors alive, but what if I told you his career left behind just as many bitter enemies as loyal fans? At 85, Pacino has finally admitted which 6 Hollywood legends he could never forgive. These weren't just minor disagreements or rumors. They were explosive confrontations, icy silences, and rivalries that shattered entire productions. You know the films, you know the performances, but you don't yet know the battles behind them. And once you do, you may never watch these classics the same way again. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Number 1. William Friedkin's disappointment. Right after the storm of fame that came with The Godfather, studios imagined Al Pacino stepping into the hands of William Friedkin, the director who had just shocked the world with The Exorcist. On paper, it sounded unbeatable. A rising actor with raw intensity, working under a filmmaker who thrived on pushing boundaries. Hollywood insiders expected a masterpiece. Instead, what they got was a storm that raged mostly behind the camera. The problem started small, with Pacino's habits rubbing Friedkin the wrong way. He would arrive late, wander away from the script, and treat rehearsal as if it was optional. For a perfectionist like Friedkin, these weren't just quirks. They were signs of disrespect. Night after night, shouting matches spilled out onto the set, loud enough for crews to remember them decades later. Arguments stretched into the early hours until exhaustion forced everyone home, only for it to start all over again the next day. Friedkin, never shy about speaking his mind, went so far as to call Pacino his biggest disappointment. With those words, any chance of repairing the relationship died instantly, leaving two titans permanently divided. Number 2. James Foley. When James Foley signed on to direct Glengarry Glen Ross, he pictured a play-like film where dialogue was sharp, exact, and carefully measured. Every pause, every inflection mattered to him. He wanted control over how words landed, like an orchestra conductor managing tempo and rhythm. But when Al Pacino walked onto set, Foley's plan began to unravel. Pacino thrived on energy that shifted without notice. One moment he'd shout, the next he'd whisper, sometimes rewriting the emotional beat of a scene on the spot. Foley kept trying to pull him back into structure, but Pacino resisted. The crew noticed it too. Days stretched long as takes piled up, not because Foley demanded extras, but because Pacino refused to perform the same way twice. What for Foley seemed like disruption felt, for Pacino, like the essence of truth. People on set described it as two visions colliding, precision meeting improvisation, neither side willing to back down. The irony is that tension seeped into the movie, and the final product felt explosive. But while audiences praised the performances, Foley stepped away exhausted, never inviting Pacino back again. Number 3. Marlon Brando. When The Godfather started filming, it was marketed as a once-in-a-lifetime chance to see two giants share the same screen. Marlon Brando had already reshaped acting once, while Pacino was suddenly the new face of Hollywood. The idea of them working side by side promised magic, but the reality was far colder. Brando showed up when he pleased, often skipping cues and changing lines without warning. Pacino, still hungry to prove himself, stood by as his own work was constantly overshadowed by Brando's reputation. That simmered into open bitterness after awards season. Brando walked away with the Oscar, but Pacino felt robbed, deciding not to attend in silent protest. His frustration was clear when he said, "I didn't think it was right. I was in that movie more than he was." For Pacino, the recognition wasn't fair. It confirmed what he already believed, that he was being dismissed in the shadow of somebody else's myth. What followed wasn't an explosive fight, it was silence. Pacino avoided him, never chasing another project with Brando, quietly keeping the distance until the end. Number 4. Robert De Niro. When Heat was released in 1995, audiences felt they were witnessing something historic. Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, two New York giants of cinema, finally sharing the screen in a duel of wits and wills. On film, the electricity was undeniable. That diner scene alone has gone down as one of the most iconic meetings in movie history. But the intensity fans celebrated spoke to a reality behind the camera that was surprisingly distant. People close to the production noticed that the two didn't spend time together when the cameras stopped rolling. There were no long debates about acting, no shared dinners, no friendship forming in the shadows. Instead, Pacino and De Niro kept their lives separate, each protective of his own process. It wasn't open hostility, just a quiet avoidance, which was enough to create tension on set. Directors like Michael Mann or, years later, Martin Scorsese had to respect that standoff. Pacino himself explained it with unsettling clarity. "We're not friends, we just show up." It turned every collaboration into something raw, as if survival replaced camaraderie. Number 5. Michelle Pfeiffer. When producers looked at Scarface, they knew that casting Elvira would be critical. Michelle Pfeiffer was still rising in Hollywood, and she didn't exactly fit Pacino's vision for the role. He was blunt about it, saying she was too soft, too fragile to embody a character who needed sharp edges. Pacino pushed against her casting, but the studio stayed firm, and Pfeiffer got the part. On set, however, the tension never eased. Pacino, known for immersing himself fully into his roles, kept a distance from her. Co-stars later remembered how little warmth he showed toward Pfeiffer, even during moments when she was shaping a performance that would eventually be called career-defining. For Pfeiffer, the atmosphere was icy, her big break unfolding under the weight of silence. The strangest part is what happened afterward. Scarface went on to become a pop culture phenomenon, and Pfeiffer's Elvira is now seen as one of the film's most lasting images. Yet Pacino never reached out for another collaboration. The irony is undeniable. He fought against her at the start, only to watch her performance tower on its own without his approval. Number 6. Gene Hackman's. When Scarecrow hit theaters in the 1970s, critics praised it as a raw, gritty road movie that cut deep into the American dream. Al Pacino and Gene Hackman delivered two wildly different yet unforgettable performances. On screen, their chemistry worked. Off-screen, it was another story entirely. What looked like balance in the final film often masked two clashing attitudes about how work should be done. Hackman was known for moving quickly. He had no patience for endless takes or prolonged searching for the truth of a moment. He wanted efficiency, a direct approach that kept everybody on schedule. Pacino, still steeped in method acting, wanted the opposite. He believed in staying inside the role, even when the cameras weren't rolling. For him, the slower and more immersive, the better. That contrast created pressure on set, with scenes sometimes dragging not because of the script, but because of the way both men refused to bend. Looking back, Hackman admitted things felt tense, and Pacino later put it simply, "We had different ideas." That difference was enough. They never worked together again. Al Pacino's career can't be told through filmography alone. Behind the cameras, there are stories of arguments, rivalries, and partnerships that collapsed before they truly began. He built a name as one of the greatest actors alive, but also as someone who rarely forgot and almost never forgave. That unwillingness to compromise turned him into both an icon and an outlier. At 85, he is remembered not just for unforgettable scenes, but for the silence and distance he left in his wake. So the question remains, was Pacino's refusal to forgive his greatest strength or his greatest weakness?